Welcome to the Abundant Soul Podcast. Today, our beautiful soul, Ashley, shares her transformative journey from feeling lost and unfulfilled to discovering her authentic self and embracing her intuition. Through personal anecdotes, she discusses the catalysts for her change, including a dark night of the soul, the importance of community support, and the challenges of navigating fear and uncertainty. Ashley emphasizes the significance of listening to one's inner voice and the power of seeking help from others during difficult times. The conversation concludes with valuable advice for listeners on how to embrace their own journeys of self-discovery and healing. We hope you will be able to get to know Ashley and feel inspired. Let's dive in her journey. Hello, good morning.
Good
How
morning.
are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
Very good. And I know you've been coming back from vacation. How was it? Costa
It was-
Rica?
Yes, beautiful. I always love traveling. It's interesting because traveling to me is where I draw a lot of inspiration. So sometimes my friends will be like, "Oh, you're traveling all the time." I'm like, "I feel like I need that though. Like it's good for me." So Costa Rica was awesome. It was good to get away, but I'm glad to be back too.
It's always good to get away, and I feel that coming back, like you're coming home, so it's the area where you get grounded, and then you can go out on an adventure. And some people wants to get grounded more longer and often, and some prefer adventure like more often, but it's always good like to have somewhere to come back.
Yes. Yes.
So today, and Ashley doesn't know, but
I know.
I want to interview you, Ashley.
What?
Before we have all the guests in, I want to hear, and I'm sure the listeners will really want to hear all about your journey. And I know you've been doing a lot of work, so do you want to share?
Okay, wow. Okay, I was like, it's funny because she's like, "I've got a topic." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. What's this topic gonna be?" Dang, now I'm under the spotlight. Okay, all right. Yes. So,
So I would say I really want to know. So first of all, we met during a Christine Hassler women's retreat where we've done a lot of inner work. And I know you've been through a transformative journey. Would you want to share what was like before this journey, before you took on this journey? How was your life?
yeah. So I would say before my little journey adventure began, that was back in 2022. So before, and what was my catalyst for my healing journey was what I like to call when kind of shit hit the fan, but like my dark night of the soul. So before that point, I felt something in me, and up to that point, I didn't really understand intuition. I knew the word, and I was like, "Oh, it's like when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up," type of thing. Like when you think, you should go this way versus that way. But I didn't really have a good relationship or connection with my intuition. So I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was something in me that was starting to scream, like, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. This is not following your heart. Like, things are not right. And instead of kind of picking that out, teasing that out, whatever you call it, or like exploring it, I was just like, nope, stop. That doesn't fit with how I've built everything in my life right now. So at that time, I was not happy in my job. I was not happy in my relationship. At the time I was married, and I felt I knew I had some sort of connection to spirituality. I didn't know what to call it, but I knew I believed in the woo-woo, if you will, but I didn't know that term at the time. But I felt like I was just kind of being that, going through the motions, and I was playing small. I had this huge theme of me, almost like my wings had been clipped, and I felt like I was small, and like I would describe myself as a very colorful person. Like very outgoing. I love all things. I see beauty in all things. I see abundance everywhere. But at that time, I just felt like I was gray and small and like keeping myself small. So there was something in me that was like, we are meant for bigger. What are we doing? It's time to break out. So the more I denied it, the louder it got. And it started to get really loud in, like, with my work. At the time, I was in management and I was not happy with certain things. And it's almost like I was waiting for things to just fall in my lap, or I was waiting for certain promotions or certain things to work out, where now in retrospect, I can see me using my voice was the lesson. So I started getting more and more comfortable with speaking up, asking for what I wanted rather than just assuming people could read my mind. So that was a challenge in itself. Figuring out work dynamics with different peers, the people that I managed, the leadership team, and again, asking for what I want rather than just waiting to see if anyone was, had a checklist. And it's like, how's Ashley doing? Is she extremely fulfilled here? Let me check in with her and see if she's getting everything that she wants. Like, no one does that. And it's so hard for us to speak up for ourselves. So I was getting to a breaking point there. In my relationship, it had just started to get to a point where we were outgrowing each other. And there were so many opportunities where he would ask me, like, are you even happy? Like, do you even want to be in this relationship? And it's almost like inside of me was like, say no. Say, like, this is your chance. Like, he is asking you. But I was so scared of the unknown that I would just push that down and then just turn it about me and be like, does that mean you don't love me? Like, and I just went into this victim mentality instead of seeing it as, maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe this is an invitation to change things. But I was not in that mindset at the time. Again, I hadn't really connected with my intuition, spirituality. So to me, it started feeling like everything was against me. Every route I looked was resistance, either to me or me resisting it. And it got to a point where I started seeking out, I started having a lot of signs come in, and I would start looking into, what do signs mean? What if I'm seeing these repeating numbers? What if I'm seeing these rare birds? And, if I'm thinking about, maybe I want to learn about intuition, and then someone that I follow on Instagram is like, I'm doing a workshop on intuition. So those little things started happening, and I started listening to them and following them. At the time, I considered them coincidences. I didn't, again, understand how to connect. So I started following these little messages, and Aliyah Lovely, she was someone very instrumental in this catalyst part of my life. She had done a reading for me, and in the reading, she pulled the storm warning card. And I remember thinking, like, nope, everything is fine. Nothing in my life is falling apart. Everything's fine. And she was so compassionate with the way she framed it. She said, yes, this is a card that can represent everything kind of being uprooted, the storm coming and leveling everything out. But what if you can reframe it? And what if you can think about it as, okay, maybe all these things have been removed from my life so that I can rebuild with what I want. I can start to rebuild what I want with who I want, however I want. Maybe it's a clean slate, and not think about it from a scarcity, like I've lost everything. Think about it from an abundant mindset. What do I want to create now? I
Mm-hmm.
get to create. And at the time, it was hard for me to process that because I was like, no, everything's being taken away from me. I felt like everything I built up was being pulled away. So again, she had started kind of like a mystery school where it was people who were interested in spirituality and intuition and reading cards and all these things. And we would just learn together. There was no judgment. There was no hierarchy of like, I know the most or I have this many years of experience. It was really a beautiful container for so many curious people. And it was very empowering. So I started dedicating time to learning about my intuition. And again, I started having these signs, especially through music. I learned that I'm clairaudient, meaning there's a bunch of the different clairs. Clairaudient is when you receive messages through sound, like you hear things. Mine comes in the form of music, and I've had a lot of, I won't say eerie, but at the time I felt it was very eerie, where certain songs will just play, or a song will stop randomly, and then another one will start. Or when I turn the radio on, it's the exact like lyrics is a message that I needed to hear.
Wow.
So that was really cool. The more I tapped into that and thought of it as a way of communication, like me getting a message that I needed to hear at that time, the more it happened.
Can I interject
Yes,
here?
sorry.
I love this. And what you're sharing is what Kathy Heller mentions all the time, the law of receptions. And how, with a radio, when it's turned off, you don't hear any music, you don't hear any sound, you don't hear any screech, nothing. But where is the music? Right? It's still there. While you turn it on, that's when it starts playing. So that's when you start receiving. And then you can, move the channels to a channel that, works with you. But the music, it's always there. So it's how you receive. And yeah, your story makes me think of that.
Yeah.
Like you were ready to receive before you were not.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I didn't know what it was. I knew something in me, but again, I had not created that relationship with myself, my inner self yet. And once I did, and I can't really pinpoint when it happened. I think it was when I was at my lowest. I'm very connected with water. So there would be times where I'd be really confused about what was going on in my marriage, in my work, and I would go walk around the lake listening to music. And again, that's when I would have the songs that would randomly play. So I would just go with it. And I remember sitting at the lake and this song played, and it was a song I had heard before a few times, but it hit me really hard. And the lyrics of the song was like, I can't recite them perfectly, but the theme of it was, you're about to go through this because if you don't, you will never know what it's like to like live life. You will never know what it's like to live, enjoy, and love. And it's happening for you. So you can't stop it. It's already started. And just know that you're loved type of thing. So it was kind of that theme. And I just started bawling because I knew it was coming. I could feel there was a huge change coming. And I think 2 days later is when my husband at the time had filed for divorce. So I was like, here it is. Here it is. Going back to what Aliyah had said, here's the storm warning card. Can I anchor into this being an opportunity for me versus devastation? I mean, yes, I mean, it was difficult, right? But I had mixed emotions about it. I was like, I can feel a part of me ending, chapter of my life ending, a part of me dying, because that's something I learned in this spiritual journey is in order for you to grow, you have to let a part of yourself go, an older version of yourself, whether that's yourself, your beliefs, things that have been holding you back. I like to think of like a snake, how a snake sheds its skin. If it does not shed, it will die.
Mm-hmm.
So as painful as it was to sit there in that moment and think like, here we go, we're in the eye of the storm. This little part of me, again, my intuition that I didn't really know yet was like, yes, here we go. You're going to be fine. You're going to be better than fine. Like, you're giving up what you know to step into great. And so I tried really hard to anchor into that. But again, at the time, going through it was difficult. I'm also very hyper independent, or I'm working on stepping out of that. But at the time, I was very much of the mindset that no one has your back besides me, right? And you have to do everything on your own. It's going to be difficult. You don't need to burden your friends with everything you're going through. And so I kind of shut down and just internalized a lot. And I have wonderful friends. They're incredibly supportive. And I love the fact that they knew when I was silent that it was time to like check on me. Because going through that again, and when you're in that level of depression, again, I'm a very colorful person. I love life, but there were days where I couldn't get out of bed and I would sleep for 3 to 4 hours at a time. And then I'd wake up and see it's 2 p.m. I don't want to feel, so I'm going to go back to sleep. And that was something that was so scary for me because it was so far removed from who I am. And I knew something was wrong and I didn't know how to ask for help and I didn't know how to vocalize it. And so that's like how my weekends would go. And then on Monday morning, I'd suck it up, put on my game face, and I'd go to work. And I think maybe coworkers knew what I was going through at the time. And some of the people, that I worked with later on, I shared what I had been going through, and they're like, we had no idea. Like, you showed up to work, you still did this, that, and the other. But it's like I would put on this game face for my day job or my job, and then when I'd get home, I would just fall apart, and I would become depressed. Weekends, I didn't want to leave bed. And it got to a point where I was like, how do I get myself out of this? Because I can't live life like this. I have to make a move. And I told one of my friends, I feel like I'm in a plank. I know my arms are going to give out, but I'm not going to come out of it. I don't want to make a decision, so I'm just holding. I don't know if I want to stay in this relationship. I don't know if I want to move forward. I don't want to make the wrong choice. So for a while, I just did nothing. And that was almost worse than making a decision because I was just keeping myself in this limbo, scared to make a move, waiting for someone else to tell me what the right decision was, when the whole lesson, now in hindsight, was for me to make the choice, for me to make a move.
So you froze.
Yes.
It was your protective part who was freezing to protect you from maybe having these big emotions or the fear of moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said like so many golden nuggets there. The releasing to make space, but that's scary.
Yeah.
That's very scary because there is the unknown and the grief. The grief is so important, and usually we forget about this, especially since we are like, okay, this happened and I need to move on. We focus on the moving on and we don't let ourselves grieve. So while you were freezing, maybe it was a part of you that was grieving. That's why you needed to sleep. That's why you needed to have your time. But I also want to highlight what you went through. It's such a reality where people around can have no idea. It's so insidious, like what you are feeling and what you are showing could be two different things. Yeah, that's what you're sharing is very powerful. And yeah, I like the plank analogy because it's like you are there, you are here, you are strong, yet you can do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then what did you do?
So at that point, oh my gosh, I think it was like, okay, I remember my ex, was then like, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should stay together. And I was like, no, I'm past that point now. But I couldn't vocalize it. So I just wanted to avoid being around him. And I think at the time he was wanting to work on things and I was already checked out. Because to me it felt like this is now the path that I need to take. I don't really want to be in a relationship where we don't have a foundation of trust. I don't feel like we had trust anymore. So I was like, I need to move on. And here I am. I was getting all of these messages through, again, I was in that mystery school. So we were doing intuitive readings, card readings with each other. I was seeking out a lot of outside perspectives on things, on what I should do. And then I would kind of process that with myself. I built myself a little Zen den, is what I called it, in my basement. And I would light candles and just learn to connect with myself, because I started experiencing like channeling, like downloads, and I wasn't really sure what it was at the time. So when I would get these thoughts, I would just write them down or text them on like a note app on my phone. And it was wild because it was not the way I speak. So it felt very much, and I couldn't stop my thumbs. It was like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and it just kept coming. And I had channeled this thing about my higher self and listening to my intuition and how to build that connection. And I remember after I, sped typed this out, I stopped and I was near the lake, near the water, and I read it because I was like, this is beautiful. It felt like I had like just connected with my inner self, my inner Ashley. And she was basically telling me like, I am always here for you. You might not hear me because I don't scream, but if you quiet down, you can hear me. And I always have your best interest at heart. I will always be here for you. I will always guide you. I have always been here. It's just sometimes the others are too loud. And when I say the others, I mean like my ego, my mind, my fears, my worry. It's almost like they're so loud that she as in my inner self, my soul, can't, there's no way. She's not going to raise her voice to be heard. She'll just patiently wait until I can quiet down all the noise. So I started to learn that if I can quiet down myself, go to that Zen den and just quiet my mind down, then I can connect, and like it's almost like answers or what I'm seeking kind of presents itself. So I was ready to move forward. I was 38 at the time. This would be the first time I would ever live alone. I realized that. Wow, I'm almost 40 and I've never lived by myself. I've always lived with my family, a friend, or a significant other. This is crazy. So this was my journey into putting myself first in all aspects, like in my career, in my relationships, in my living situation. Everything became, what do you want, Ashley? And I am very much a giver, a nurturer. I love taking care of other people. And I have never focused on myself in that way. So the beginning of this journey was very uncomfortable for me. A lot of it felt selfish. A lot of it felt, well, how do I do this? And it's like, no one's going to be able to give you the answers of how to take care of yourself but you. And that was hard for me, because sometimes I can be in the mindset of like, give me a list of things to do and I'll do them. Tell me what needs to be done and I'll do them. But when it's like, I just need to quiet my mind, connect with myself, and really tune into what do I need, that was new to me. So that was kind of the beginning of, I had moved into my own apartment, had my own things, and began focusing on rebuilding a life that I wanted, that was true to me, and that felt like I could live that colorful, beautiful, joyful, loving life. I wasn't there yet, but I knew that I had chosen the path that was headed there. And again, I have amazing friends, and they would say, gosh, your light is back. Your spark is back. And hearing that, yes, it felt good, but it made me so sad that I had dimmed my light and not been true to myself for so many years. I had this extreme guilt that I had let myself down, and I had allowed myself to be small and gray, and so that was definitely a process to work through, giving myself grace, learning to view it as I didn't have the tools at the time, but I'm getting the tools now. I'm gaining the skills and the knowledge to take care of myself now.
I want also to highlight that, yes, your light was dimmed, but this is what allowed you to discover this realm of, discover this class, the mystic class, discover all the intuition. Otherwise, you would not, because before every growth, you need to be uncomfortable. There is something like a storm that you have to face. And from that point on, that's where you build your growth. You will learn something. You will learn, doesn't matter if you are doing the personal growth or not, doing the work, you will learn something. But then you could look at it as in a positive way. What did I learn from it? Or a more negative way, a more like, I'm a victim here. So how did you work through that guilt?
Man. So I think at the time too, I had moved into my own apartment, and then I started getting more curious about spirituality. I think at the time, Aliyah had a podcast, and she had taken a break for maternity. And I was like, I am so into all of this right now. I need more. I need more. And at the time, I was learning about masculine and feminine. I always thought that meant male and female. Like it was more of like a roles thing. I didn't understand that, or I didn't know at the time that it was energetic and that we all have masculine and feminine energies. And there's like a balance or harmonization, like you like to say, with it. So I got very curious because I saw a lot of my qualities falling to the masculine, again, with the hyper independence. You've got to do everything. I definitely took on more of a masculine role in my marriage, with having to do all the duties or feeling like the responsibilities were not shared, that it fell on me. And I started to realize I really, really longed to be in my feminine. And I started to realize I don't think I've really ever been able to fully be in that. So I got curious and I looked up a podcast about masculine and feminine energies. And that's when I found Danny Morell's podcast, and it really resonated. And I loved learning about that. And then it was like the next thing I knew, he's like, oh, I'm doing a conference, down in Austin. And I'm not an impulsive person, but 11 o'clock at night, my little finger was like, click, buying tickets. I'm going, here's my flight. And I have never traveled anywhere alone before. But again, something in me was like, we need to go there. We need to do this. And I wasn't afraid. I was excited. And so I went to that conference. And in that conference, again, this was kind of the first time, it was like a 3-day event. You really tap into your inner self. And it's a lot about learning how to give yourself what you need and going inward. And that is when I kind of started to learn about the different feelings I was having. So back to your question about like that guilt that I had. Who was feeling guilty? Was it me? Was it a wounded part of me? Was it a little me that felt that? When I felt like shame and fear, jealousy, like all of these feelings, he just did a really good job of breaking it down. And in those 3 days, it was a way for me to kind of, not a roadmap of where I wanted to head, but kind of some sort of structure for me to begin processing all of this stuff that was coming up for me. And so then that just kind of snowballed. to where that year, I like to call 2023 my Eat, Pray, Love year, because it just felt like I was doing so many things, like saying yes. And when things excited me, saying yes to it rather than logically thinking it through. Not to say that these decisions were not logical, but I noticed when things were a heck yes or a hell yes, they always fulfilled me in some way. So if there was hesitation, if I wasn't really into it, then I started learning that's probably not for me. So I had a lot of these yeses. And again, I did a few conferences of Danny's, and then Christine Hassler was someone where I really resonated with. I think she was on Aaliyah's podcast too, and she had talked about how she had gone through a divorce, found love when she was 40. And I was like, wait, what? Like, okay, I'm kind of resonating with this. There's hope for me out there. It felt like we had parallel situations. So in a way, I felt understood, seen, heard type of thing. So I started following her too and went to her women's retreat. That's how we met. And again, just continued to do these things that felt like it was going to lead to growth or lead to me learning more about myself or me learning more about these things that started to intrigue me around inner work.
I love that. And I know that after Christine Hassler's work, I call it workshop, but retreat, you made something that not many people are capable to do with your career.
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you want to share?
Yes, yes, I will share, because that was a big part of, again, being my authentic self. And I want to say the whole theme of going through, like from that little dark night of the soul, when I sat there and cried at the lake and knew something was coming, it was like, you're going to have to start putting yourself first. And you're going to need to be your authentic self. Because when you feel free to be your authentic self, that's when you shine the brightest. So I started just like the onion thing that people will talk about, how it's like you peel a layer off, then you got another one, then you got another one. And it's not that you're taking away things. It's like you're removing these like protective barriers that maybe you put on over time from different traumas or different experiences. So just getting back to that place of like who you are. So to say all these conferences, all these retreats I did, I came back at the end of the year and I was like, man, I have a strong feeling towards I want to teach yoga. I think like there's signs going towards that now, because yoga played a huge part in helping me emotionally and mentally when I was going through everything. I knew that exercise was good for you, but yoga was different. Yoga was a place where I could shut my mind down. I didn't care what anybody else was doing. It was like me with myself, and I could process a lot, and it made me feel good. So then again, weird ways how that came into my life, the opportunity to go through yoga teacher training, and I impulsively signed up for it. And then I had a job with my career at the time. There was a lot of moving stuff going on. And I started to feel like inside of me, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't belong here. And I noticed myself trying to like suppress it down, and it's like, no, this is a steady paycheck. You're making good money. You love everyone that you work with. Like, just stay safe. And then this, like, my inner Ashley was like, no, this is your invitation. Like, you have got to speak up for yourself. This is not fulfilling you. There is something else. Give this up so you can step into the great. But it's so hard to make moves when you don't know the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a very risk-adverse person for the most sense, especially in career. It scared me. And I was like, well, there's no other offers on the table. What would I do? And so it got to a point in January where it felt, I kept telling my peers who were managers with me. I was like, I feel like I have a volcano inside of me and I am not an angry person. I feel like something is coming up. And I had done a soul reading right before it too, where the theme of that was your inner child is ready to live a life of joy. And she's asking you to break away from this job because it's keeping you down. And I was like, oh my gosh, here comes this theme again. I was like, oh, and I was like, okay, I just got to do it. So I knew it was coming again. I could feel it stewing in me that I was like, if I don't resign or if I don't quit, something's going to explode. So I need to find a right time to do it. And then I went back into my logical brain. I was timing it out. How should I do it? When should I do it? What's the best way to do it? Should I ask someone else about it? So it got to the point where there were some changes being made in the organization, and I did not agree with it. And I was like, this is my time. So I was like, you know what? This no longer aligns with me. Where your vision is heading doesn't align with me anymore. I'm going to be moving on. And the way I viewed it is that it almost, like in my mind, I felt like when you're at holidays and there's a kids table and an adult table, it felt like I was an adult sitting at the kids table. And I was like, it's time to get up and leave because I've outgrown this table. And it's nothing to say bad about the company or anything. It's just, I'm just using that metaphor that it felt like I outgrew it and now I belong at a different table. So it's time to get up from this seat. And almost immediately, I think it was the same week that I quit my job, I had someone else reach out and was like, hey, this might be a shot in the dark, but would you ever consider, joining our team? We're looking for coaches. And I love mentoring, coaching, managing other. I love people. So I was like, oh, that's crazy. I just quit my job. Yes, let's do it. So again, I took the leap. I had built up some savings to where I was like, I will be okay if I just take some time, which that in itself is so incredibly scary to do. It sounds great when you have a job because you're like, I could just, tap into my savings. I'm going to be like walking every day, reading all the books I have. But or for me personally, once I had shifted out of that steady paycheck, there was no more money coming in, but I was aligning up my passions. Like that was great. It felt good. But then I had this fear of like, what's going to happen in this amount of time? My gosh, we should probably just start looking at Indeed now. Like you need to find another job now. So it was like balancing that out and learning to be okay with not knowing the outcome and receiving. That was a huge lesson for me, is that if I could learn to be in that abundant mindset, easier said than done, but to just think that things were going to happen for me, that I would be taken care of. And I tried to anchor into times in my past where things just worked out for me. And that helped me to see like, okay, that was, a time when I really wanted something. I didn't think it was going to work. And then not magically, but it ended up happening. So I anchored into that. But yeah, leaving a corporate job, a steady paycheck, benefits to just follow what lights you up. It sounds great in the movies. It sounds great when it's someone else. But when it's you, it was terrifying for me. And I struggled a lot with it because it then became a blank canvas for me. And I realized that I typically respond to things. Like if you give me choices like A, B, C, I'm like, oh, cool, I'll go with C. But if it's like a blank canvas where it's like, create what you want, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Am I going to make the wrong decision? What do I want to make? What do you want to make? Should I ask someone? So
I relate.
yes.
I relate. I'm the same.
Yeah. So that was a very difficult time. And that was the beginning of this year. So I was doing the things I loved. I was in yoga teacher training. I was doing coaching. But there was still something missing. I didn't know what it was. And during that time, I still had so much fear that would come to surface and I would process. And so I'm very grateful that I went to those conferences, listened to those podcasts, did those retreats, because I started to gain skills on when I have these fears, how can I process it? Because if I were to look at them now, I would describe them as irrational. But when I'm experiencing them, they're very real. I had a fear that I would lose everything, that someone was going to come, drain my bank accounts, take everything, like take my bookcases, my clothes. I would be living in a car. Like I went worst case scenario. And I didn't know why. And I was trying to like listen to a podcast, read a book, and get an answer just like that. Like in 10 minutes, I'll figure out why I feel like this. But I realized it took me weeks. And there wasn't one process that helped. It was like a culmination of things, of being in nature, journaling, learning how a lot of these fears are fears from like my childhood. You know, when I was a young girl and watching my parents go through divorce and watching their money struggles and noticing that the fear that I was experiencing at almost 40 was the same as the little girl who was 10 years old. And that was wild to make those connections and sometimes have things come up to process that maybe I hadn't thought of in 10, 20 years. So it was a lot of healing, but I'm very proud of myself since starting this healing journey that when those heavy feelings come up, I recognize, okay, this is an opportunity for growth for me. This sucks. I know I'm sitting in the muck right now, but every other time that I have sat in the muck, it's turned out great. This is just the crappy part right now. And I know there's some sort of learning in here and there's some awesome thing that's going to happen that I can't even see right now. So I'm very grateful to have that reframe. It's not always easy to shift into that when your emotions are so high, but I try to anchor into that what's happening is just expanding me, and it's scary because I've never been there before, and it's scary because I don't know the outcome.
Thank you so much. We are coming to the end. I have one last question though for the listeners. Which is one advice you could give them?
I would say, from my perspective, when you're feeling those heavy emotions, when you're feeling like no one will understand and you don't want to burden your friends, your family, as hard as it is to ask for help, I feel like there's always so many people around you that are willing. And sometimes it's people that are further out. Maybe it's not your best friends, maybe it's not your immediate family, but I've met so many people, including Steph, where you cross paths and you're able to connect on a level and you start to attract people into your life. It almost feels like who see you for who you are. They can offer some medicine, as I call it, or offer things to you that you didn't know that you needed. So seeking help, you know, whether it be like physically asking like, hey, I'm not okay. Can we have coffee? Can you come over? Or seeking help through listening to a podcast or finding like-minded people. Again, saying yes to flying to Austin by yourself to see what is this all about? Because I connected with some really great people there and I'm still friends with them. And they're a huge part of my life now and throughout my healing journey. So as hard as it is to ask for help, you know, just finding a way that feels comfortable for you. And it might not be your immediate family, because sometimes that can be very hard. And sometimes that comes with its own set of variables, you know. So meeting people who are already in that healing space and they can have an understanding of what you're going through. Maybe they haven't gone through it themselves, but they understand it, they respect it. That has been a huge game changer for me. And that, I mean, I don't think I could have I would not be where I am today if I didn't have those connections with strangers. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much. I love the discussion, and now everyone was able to hear your story and where you were to where you are and all the work that you've done. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Steph. Oh,
all right.
Awesome.
Well, talk to you next week.
All right, see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. We hope the stories and insights we've shared today have inspired you to embrace your abundant soul and live your life with more presence, purpose, and passion.
Remember, the path to awakening is unique for each of us, but we're all connected by our yearning for deeper meaning and authenticity. So keep an open heart and mind and trust that the universe will guide you exactly where you need to go.
This has been the Abundant Soul Podcast. See you next Sunday as we continue to explore the depths of spiritual awakening and personal growth.